May 2022. I'm going to read you a statement here to do with a previous file and actually most of the research files for the Real Matrix files that you have come to know as the XYZ files that I started pulling together in around August to September in 2016. And I'm going to read you out a statement here. And when I've finished, I'll explain the relevance of this statement with the rest of the files. We separated in 1999, had moved into a new house. He showed no interest in either of us, me or our son. Separate bedrooms. He tried to choke me with a broom for asking him if he minded I opened a window. On another occasion, he hit our 3-year-old son so hard he urinated on the floor and ran screaming to the toilet. We fought during our 5-year relationship. He was violent, most often because I took issue with his disrespect, which he expressed in a variety of ways. When I left in 1999, I moved into an apartment with my son. He called me soon after and asked if he could come over because he wanted to talk to me. He did, and when I asked him to leave, he refused. I had to drive around in my car for half an hour, hoping he'd be gone by the time I got back. He wasn't. I begged him to leave, and he finally did. He then began calling all my friends at night to see where I was and who I was with. One time he said something to me about what I was doing on stage with another singer, and it was something I had not done. I remember being shocked to think that people were reporting back to him about my whereabouts and what I was doing whenever I was at work or out socially. He had also lied to everyone about why I left him, to smear me as a cheater when there was no one. I left him because I didn't love him anymore and my son deserved better. Another time he turned up at a venue where I was supporting friends of mine playing in a band. He arrived with his 18-year-old girlfriend and they ignored me and acted like I was an outcast. Another time he came to a different venue when he found out I was going there on Sunday nights, and he stood at the end of the bar monitoring me. This was 2 years after we had separated. We had previously made an agreement that he would pay $100 a week in child support, but he never paid it, saying he didn't have it. So I had to go to the child support agency and file for an assessment. He wasn't honest about his income and only paid $5 a week. When he spent our son's inheritance from his grandmother's estate, I went back to the child support agency and they changed the amount to $25 a week for a period of time I don't remember, and then the payments reverted back to $5 a week for the next 10 years or so. His payments were never on time, and I had to call the agency over and over again asking them to pursue the payments. One time I even had to pay him back money he had given because he paid it in the wrong financial year. When our son turned 17, the child support agency contacted me and said they had changed their rules about self-employed parents because they realized that their tax returns were not an accurate reflection of their income. They ordered him to pay $100 or so a week for 12 months until our son turned 18. He then accused me of trying to supplement my income when the request was initially made. When my son turned 18, we had an argument at home. He went to his father's house. Later that day, I was in the back room and came back into the kitchen and saw the two of them walking towards me down the hallway. I immediately asked my ex to leave, and he refused. I reminded him I paid the rent and that this was my house, and he went out the front door. I went to close the front door, and my son pulled it open and pushed me outside to talk to him, his father. His father accused me of writing messages on other people's Facebook pages. And when he told me their names, I had never heard of them, and I had not done this. I didn't understand what was happening. He asked if I said things about child support and groupies. I said yes, I said something on my own Facebook page. My son became enraged at me. His father told me to stop talking about child support and the groupies that had been stalking me and my son on Facebook. And then he threatened to put me in a mental institution in front of my son, a son I raised by myself and homeschooled by myself. I raised the child support issue, and his father said, "You deserved it." And then they both left. In the next few days, I was having trouble processing my brain. I could not process my thoughts. I couldn't understand how my words would turn up on other people's Facebook pages. And I thought maybe someone had made a fake account of me and done that. I was in complete despair and devastation that my son had been part of this incident and felt as if we had been ripped apart. Then I began experiencing losing time, where I'd find myself staring at the ground, not knowing how long I'd been doing it for. I thought I might be in shock and went to the hospital having a breakdown. I was treated on the spot by a mental health rep, and they confirmed that the symptoms I was having of losing time were part of the shock process and that it would slowly subside. This was in 2013, 2014, when my son was 18. In 2017, I was on my computer working and I saw a notification come up from a familiar name, a name I recognized as being a friend of my ex. She had once visited from America at Christmas and stayed with him. That was the last time I recall her name being around. I became immediately alarmed and started panicking and asked her to leave me alone right away. She did not. She sent me messages saying that she wanted to talk to me and made disturbing comments about what she thinks of my son, and she made a point of saying she wasn't involved in the home invasion. I had realized by that time that I had been stalked on Facebook by my ex's female friends, who then lied to him about how and where they saw my two posts about child support and groupies, which caused him to come to my house that day and make those accusations and threats in front of our son. I asked my son to tell his father to tell her to leave us alone. Instead, they demanded proof of what I was saying, and I had to screenshot evidence that she was on my page and sending me messages. Only then did they believe me. The stalker then wrote an abusive letter about me on her Facebook page, which I did not see. My son told me about it, and he asked her to delete it and leave me alone. His father at no point intervened or put a stop to this woman's behaviour. I was being stalked, and she was reporting back to him about me. This is 22 years after our separation. She admitted that she had sent screenshots of her conversation with me to my ex and showed my son also. She tried to make it look like I was the problem. I felt sick with very bad anxiety, like I was being watched, and I couldn't breathe. I had developed a fear of him and anything to do with his female friends. I felt hunted. In January 2022, my son came over for dinner in my new apartment after we'd spent a long time together moving everything. I was looking forward to his company and made a nice dinner. Halfway through the evening, he began withdrawing and became very antisocial, but wouldn't say why, except that he didn't feel happy. I suggested it was better for him to go home and expressed my disappointment because it had been happening a lot, and we had an agreement that he would communicate openly with me when he felt that way. He left, and I called him 3 days later asking if he still wanted me to pick him up to take him to a photo session. He said no. I tried calling again after that, and he sent me text messages accusing me of not caring about him. It angered me to hear him say that because I felt that he was trying to cause drama as soon as I had moved into my new place, and that his moods had become something I could no longer advise him on because he never took any of my advice. I was also angry that I had given him a lot of money to sustain him through lockdowns, his own apartment, furniture. I cleaned his apartment. We'd spend a lot of time together and usually had a good time and spoke openly about many things, so I did not understand why he would say this to me, that I do not care about him. The following week, he called me to arrange dinner to make up for the last time. I suggested we could eat out. The day before our dinner, he sent a text message to cancel, then he blocked my number. I couldn't call him back. I'm on my own with very few friends. I felt abandoned and shut out. I withdrew and spent most of my time inside my apartment for the next 3 months. I was exhausted from moving and neglected doing all the things I had wanted to do because he had shut me out. I felt like I was just waiting around for this to be over. During that time, I was on Twitter promoting my music and my books. Eventually, the conversation turned into the Ukraine war, and I was interested in that, so I took a break from promoting my work and joined the public discourse. During this time, I remember being at home, feeling that I had been treated so unfairly. It was a horrible feeling of frustration, and that I could not call him to talk it through with him was very frustrating and angered me. He gave no explanation for why he just vanished and abandoned me. I said some things on Twitter about it, indirectly expressing myself. I thought that someone may have told him to cancel the dinner, maybe his dad or his ex-girlfriend or even a friend. I approached a female friend of my ex's on Twitter who had regular daily communication with my son on Facebook when he was only 15 years old. I did not approve at the time, but I was never asked for permission either. She was in her late 20s, and she is now very good friends with his father. I felt that something must have been said by someone to make my son cut off from me, because it was totally unexpected and unprovoked. I wrote 1 or 2 messages to this person, to a very old account, which I half assumed she wouldn't even see. And I said that it isn't right to socialise every day with 15-year-olds. I felt that she had played a role in problems we had at home when my son was growing up during vulnerable teenage years. Back then, she was a groupie of his father's and had latched on to our son for that reason. She was interested in his father, and we all knew this. So now that she is his friend, I suspected she might have had something to do with my son's behaviour. I also made comments about child support and how I wanted to sue for the money. I was so angry. A week or so later, maybe more, I remember being at my laptop and feeling as if someone was watching me. I know my son does this, and it made me feel isolated and observed because I could not call him. I suspected he may have been checking my Twitter, so I blocked him from doing that because I expect adult behaviour, not childish online stalking. Very soon after that, I remember feeling fuzzy in the head and like someone was watching me. I searched for my own name to see if any accounts had been opened using my name. The account I had provided as evidence came up straight away. It was opened on April 21, and I found it on May 5. I had no idea who was behind it. But because my son and I weren't talking, I felt he may have had something to do with it. I felt sick, angry, in shock, and it felt there was a group of people doing it because the name of the account kept changing, along with the profile picture. It was using a private photo of me and my son taken in 2016 and using my name as an impersonator account where the poster was speaking as if they were me. I felt psychologically tortured by it. It caused me not to trust any of my friends. I did not want to go outside, and I could not think of anything else. My brain became hooked on the anonymity of the account and trying to figure out who it was. When I said if it was my son or not, they said no, it was someone else. I still couldn't think who it might be. I went to the police twice about it. The first time they told me to get the info from Twitter. Twitter doesn't give that information. So I went back to the police and they said to call cybercrime. So I made a report with cybercrime and they sent me back to the police. So I went to the police again, and this time I was helped. And I called my son, finally, after 3 months, and I was able to get through. He said it wasn't him, and I showed him the messages on the account. He said he thought he might know who it was, so he asked his dad, and his father confirmed that it was the same woman who had approached me in 2017, that she was a friend of his, and that he, his father, had known about it for a week. I called the police to tell the constable who it was and that I wanted to press charges and get a restraining order on this woman. He informed me that because she lives in America, that he would need to file an information report and send it to Interpol, who would then forward it to the state police. As I write this, it is now the 16th of May, and this woman has not stopped stalking me. The messages she wrote on the account show that she had been stalking me for a very long time, and a lot of it are things that my ex has said about me. That he knew about it a whole week prior to me finding out is because she reports back to him on what I say on the internet. We have been separated for 22 years. I could not conceive of this happening to me again after we have been through so much last year, losing my mother and our homes. We were even trapped in the worst bushfires in our country's history. I had been treated for post-traumatic stress disorder between 2019 and 2020, but was originally referred in 2016 and did not attend out of fear of having to drive there. This woman and my ex have caused so much damage to my life and to my son's life, to my to my relationship with my son, to our work, and to my health. Her messages are a hate crime, a malicious act intended to wound and rip my son away from me. The anonymity of the account made it all the more horrifying. I was beside myself with stress. I simply cannot take it anymore, and that my ex is still receiving reports about me, monitoring me online when he has no claim on me whatsoever, is so disturbing and destructive. They should both be restrained and charged for prolonged surveillance, malicious intent, psychological harm, bullying and intimidation, silencing tactics, and causing me brain injury, resulting in PTSD, home invasion, trespass, privacy invasion, violations of my rights, financial abuse, domestic violence, coercive control via surveillance, intimidation, and threats. My ex has been doing this for 22 years. His female friend, and now my stalker, has been doing it for 8 years. End of statement. Normally, I wouldn't venture, into the area of domestic violence on this channel because, as you all know, this channel is a science and technology channel, and it's to do with the simulation we live in and how our technology today is impacting us and creating this simulated, digitized, artificial reality. But more recently, there has been occurrences within the simulation, the social media simulation, where a lot of different pockets of data are happening at the one time. So there are data mergers occurring. We have the Ukraine war on one side. We have the Julian Assange case on the other side. And we have Amber Heard and Johnny Depp on the other side. And these are just a few of the main themes that seem to be whirring around in popular culture, if you can call it that, entertainment, war, on social media. And in the midst of all this, I'm attacked most severely by a stalker who happens to be still a friend of my ex, and there's no apparent rational reason for it. Someone purchased my books on March 15 and 16. If any of you get this far through this podcast and you just hear me say that, March 15, 16, please raise your hand. Let me know in the comments if you purchased 2 of my books on March 15 and 16. The account that was opened to smear and silence, torment, bully, threaten, intimidate, and harass me was done under the theme of the names in one of my books and included information that was inside one of the books. The Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial is obviously to do with the defamation, but more predominantly domestic violence. Who's right, who's wrong, who's telling the truth, who's not, what's true, what's not, so that accusations of defamation can be confirmed or denied. Defamation, as you know, is something that isn't true, that impacts a person's reputation, not something that is true. We all have the free right to speak the truth wherever we may find it, no matter who it's about. And if the information is true, those individuals are not entitled by law to stifle the freedom of speech of others, as long as their most direct privacy is not being invaded, such as their private details. What was very interesting to me when I looked over the messages on this account, the stalker's account, and did a little bit of background research on it, is I noticed that the dates that I found that were relevant aligned with the research in the Real Matrix files. May 13 is when I found out who it was behind the account. April 21, which is featured in the files, is when the account was opened. It is also the date. Numbers are prominent in Twitter's IP address, and it is the birth date of the Queen of England. The stalker's birth date is the 26th of December, which is when JonBenét Ramsey's body was found downstairs in the basement, where she also had a bike. For those of you who have followed these files in more detail than perhaps others, you will have noticed that I have made constant mention of what I referred to as the 911 bike. It's a coded piece of data, and it's a coded piece of data that has turned up in several areas during the course of the research. It is there on the wall behind George Bush when he was alerted to the fact that the World Trade Center towers had been impacted by aeroplanes on September 11, 2001. It's right there behind him, picture of a bike. It is there in JonBenét Ramsey's basement. It is her bike. I then found it on the website of the township where my stalker lives, on the very front page up the top, on a road sign, a bike. It is also featured prominently and for the longest time in the movie The Wizard of Oz. It is the bike that the Wicked Witch rides on. Some of you may be aware that there is a Wizard of Oz psyop, crazy as it sounds, that has been occurring through social media, and that I have shown and pointed out by referencing the background coding of social media, in which the user reaction codings clearly represent and state openly designations for Toto, designations for Dorothy, designations for 911, plane and flame, and anger. These words are very clear in Facebook's background coding. Now, when we have so much data all merging together, everything that is the same aligns with itself. Everything that is the same aligns with itself where it is represented in other areas as the same thing. So the bike is the 911 bike, it's Muhammad Ali's bike, it's a troll's stolen bike, it is JonBenét Ramsey's bike, it is the Wizard of Oz bike, and here we are in May 2022 with all the dates lining up, and it is the bike that's on the road sign on the township of where my stalker lives and works, in a town that is a little similar to something you might find in Kansas, which happens to be a neighboring state of where this woman lives. I'm just reporting the facts, and that if those of you who are interested enough in these files want to go through and take a harder look at the information that I've provided over the course of the last 6 years, that these are not coincidences. They're not a case of somebody looking for patterns. This is a case of me noticing where the same information keeps appearing. As you know, there's a cluster algorithm that's in work through NodeXLGraphGallery.org. The Social Media Research Foundation are a bunch of Microsoft employees who have been data mining social media and republishing the information that they extract, recoding it and sending it back through the system via a DLL, dynamic link library, by embedding profiles into their website and therefore passing this information back along the lines of communication to these people and reprogramming the entirety of the social media system to function according to the algorithm, which is the Closet-Newman-Moore cluster algorithm, funded by the United States Department of Defense and created by students at Santa Fe University several years ago, headed by Ben Schneiderman and Mark Smith, without the knowledge of people on Twitter or anyone on Facebook or anyone on Instagram. They are not mentioned in the terms of service of any network, and they remain in constant operation. They've been responsible for engineering through mind control, which they seem to be unaware of because they are inept, but incredibly entitled to do this to other people without them knowing about it. They have engineered everything from violence, crime, rape, torture, wars, disease, terrorist attacks, home invasions, and general cyberbullying on social media. This is just where it is at. This is where it is at. When somebody performs a scientific experiment, they keep repeating the experiment to see if the same result keeps turning up. And if the same result keeps turning up, we don't call that a coincidence. We call that as confirmation of the evidence. It's confirmation of the result. It supports that the experiment that's being done and the theory that's being tested keeps ringing true. So when we find data that keeps appearing from dates, names, and images that keep turning up, this is not a coincidence. This is an experiment result that keeps turning up the same result because the theory is true. Supporting evidence for everything that I have been talking about for the last 6 years. Just to go back to the JonBenét Ramsey thing, you might, if you haven't been to this channel before and you're hearing me talk about it, you might be wondering, what is she talking about? It's a bunch of data that is central to an attack that I sustained on May 13 in 2016. And it was a batch of data that matched pretty damn closely, 98%, to something that I experienced, an attack that was unexplained on May 13, 2016. The name of the woman involved was Patsy. JonBenét Ramsey's mother was Patsy Ann, and the name of the woman involved was Patsy Ann. Sorry, I forgot to mention her second name is actually Patsy Ann as well. The young man involved looked exactly like JonBenét Ramsey's brother. The room in which it occurred is exactly like the room in which JonBenét Ramsey was found killed. The windows on the walls are exactly the same. The fact that it is at Christmas is also of particular note when we start looking at the mainframe coding. The birth date of my stalker happens to be the 26th of December, which is when JonBenét Ramsey's body was found. A private message I received from a troll after 4 years of absolutely having no contact with this person whatsoever was received on the 6th of August, which is JonBenét Ramsey's birth date. So these are no longer coincidences when you get data that aligns so specifically. And then there's the bike, and then there's Kansas, and then there's Wicked Witches, and then there's tornadoes, and then there's data tornadoes, and then there's Facebook coding, there's Dorothy, there's Toto, there's a 1934-35 movie that's come out that is probably the most widely known, most played, broadly recognised, most famous film of all time, a highly symbolic film, highly symbolic, that is being flushed through the system in such a way as that it keeps repeating. There's a wicked witch who comes along and scares the shit out of everybody, is jealous, wants the ruby slippers. In today's climate, they want the rubles. And meaning the West want the rubles, and we have the Wicked Witch of the West, and it is the West who is coming under scrutiny for their somewhat questionable approach toward war and what they allow to happen in some countries, who they decide to persecute, and generally throwing their hands up as if they are completely blameless in world affairs and things that go wrong. A Wicked Witch of the West. And my stalker lives near a street called East Street, which is the Wicked Witch of the East. You might hear me saying these things and go, oh, no, she's just starting to be crazy. She's just rambling and trying to make connections where there aren't any. No, as I've said, these patterns are not necessarily patterns. They are the re-emergence of data that is already in the system, and they keep showing up because the theory is true. Every time this so-called experiment flushes out a result, it always has the same batch of data in it. It has the same batch of numbers. It has the same images. It has the same names. And it's all right there in your face. The domestic violence element of this is because of the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial. It's a case of, in my particular case, of prolonged stalking and surveillance by somebody that I left 22 years ago, who has female friends that he still talks about me to them. Why? I have no idea why I am a constant source of information and gossip with somebody I left 22 years ago is beyond me. I have absolutely no idea why I would still be a topic of conversation. Nonetheless, the entitlement that has been displayed, the surveillance, the monitoring of me over this period of time has pushed me to a point where I now have to take legal action. I now have to make criminal charges. I now have to make sure that the law is enforced. And sadly, that I have to make sure that these people go before a court and answer for what they have done to a single female and her son, my son, for 22 years. A constant torment and a constant surveillance and monitoring and silencing and threatening and intimidating to prevent very simple and really not all that surprising truths from being spoken. Most people are aware that child support is a very tricky and controversial subject. A lot of people talk about it. I don't know why my ex, for example, has a problem if I talk about it, other than he may not want people to know the truth because it would embarrass him in front of his professional colleagues. And I would suggest to him that perhaps that's for him to deal with, and for him to face, and that you can't silence these things. With domestic violence, it falls under financial abuse. And if I've written a book about it, which I have, called Big Man, A Wake-Up Call for Women, I'm entitled to reference it as many times as I please as a reference to financial abuse that can happen in domestic abuse relationships. 22 years ago, I mean, we're talking 25 years ago, that all of this, that's how long ago. Yeah. So just, if any of you are out there finding out you've got ex-partners that are still pulling shit on you 25 years later, get the restraining order. Yes, it is still programmed into the system, and it keeps repeating because the data keeps repeating, and these people are frigging just totally mind controlled by their own devices and Facebook. But you still have to protect yourself in the real sense, in the real world, so that you can live at least somewhat of a free and happy life without being constantly spied on. The other interesting facet to this, when I'm talking about spying, at the same time as all this data going through the system, the Julian Assange case has come up, where there's an opportunity for the UK to extradite him to America. And there was a certain window of time where everybody could lodge appeals in the protests and whatnot to Priti Patel to ask her not to extradite him to America. The Australian government has pretty much disowned him, which is, of course, what we should expect from the Australian government. They're completely useless, and have been for a very long time. They're also incredibly dishonest and incredibly cowardly. So spying, surveillance, espionage, all of these sorts of things is something that I have been the victim of. I'm not talking about just the general, having a look at someone's Twitter profile and seeing what that account's about to see if you want to follow it or not. I'm talking about a very intrusive and invasive, quiet background mission, agenda to stalk my posts, to wait and see if I say anything that might be offensive to my ex, which is completely insane and shouldn't be happening. My teacher, who I've referenced on my website and in one of the books, is a woman that I met a long, long time ago in the year 2000 on the internet, when I first got the internet. So I got the internet in the year 2000, right? Her name was Winifred Barton. She was already in her 80s when I met her online. And I only came across her because she had, I went to a spiritual New Age website and I clicked on a link, and I kept following my intuition as to which links to click on, and eventually I found an email address for this woman and all her work. And so I contacted her, and without even knowing how to send email, I just tested it out and tried it, and I got a response. And the original communication sort of resulted in knowing her for the next 10 years online, and receiving mail from her and being introduced to metaphysical teachings. Metaphysical, for those of you who don't know, is not just airy-fairy spirituality. Metaphysics is when we look at psychology, religion, physics, and philosophy as one study. Metaphysics and cubical wave field thought, which is what I was taught, is where we take different realms of knowledge and study and look at where the common denominator is in the underlying theme that unites these two areas of study. For some, it is science and religion. Well, God might be a particular type of quark or a particle that's everywhere inside everything, for example. So there are different ways that we have in knowledge and study and research that define what we understand and what cubical wave field thought does in metaphysics, in the way that I was taught, is it brings all these fields of knowledge together so that we can understand what the singular message is. And we learn how to relate one thing to another. This is actually falls in line with the holographic universe and fractals. And so what we're doing is we're looking at how knowledge and data is represented exponentially and fractally over and over again, showing up in various different ways, but all still being underpinned by the same original code. It's the same original chip that makes the hologram work. The fractals, the repeating patterns. So to have anyone try and gaslight people who see patterns, what they're doing is they're denying fractals. They're denying the possibility of a holographic universe. They're denying the literal science of the human mind, and that it is almost like a crystal prism, creating and projecting and seeing the holographic reality that is fed to us. So they're very ignorant people that would say this, and they're also denying machine learning and algorithms that operate specifically to notice patterns and pull information together based on the similarity of the information that they find with an algorithm, so that my bike, Muhammad Ali's bike, JonBenet Ramsey's bike, the Wicked of Witch's bike, and a bike on a road sign are all the same goddamn bike, okay? And the one that is directly behind George Bush on the wall on September 11 at the school when he was informed that the World Trade Center had been attacked. And my teacher, Winifred Barton, back in the 70s, she ran a self-sustained community in Coe Hill in Canada, Ontario, I think. And she was born on the 5th of May. And it was on the 5th of May that I found the stalker's account. Just another connection there. My teacher, Winifred Barton, was highly respected. She was a doctor in her field. And she was appearing on public radio to talk about an experience that she had with 40 other abductees of a UFO. Now here, what is the other chunk of data that's going through social media at the moment? The congressional hearings on UFOs. And my teacher in the 70s was talking on public radio about an experience that she had with 40 other abductees of being abducted by a UFO. And it is the foundation of most of her work. She spent the next 30 years pulling together all that she had learned while she was on this particular craft in her experience, and pulled together her knowledge on metaphysics, statistics, philosophy, religion. It's an incredible read. She wrote The Cosmic Cube and many other books, which you really have to be on a whole other freaking planet sometimes to even understand, but it's what I studied for 20 years. She was eventually raided by the CIA. Some of her friends ended up dead. They stole her computers and accused her of espionage. Hello, Julian Assange. They accused her of espionage. She had to go to court. She lost $5 million trying to defend herself from false accusations of espionage. She won. She died in 2016. In her 90s. And because I have made this connection with her online, I am now the one who is sitting here being spied on, monitored, abused, harassed, threatened into silence, defamed, stalked, hunted, attacked. I've received death threats, but I haven't received them from the United States government. I received them from the people in my own life. That all of this data accumulates into my actual life at a personal level, where my ex feels like a CIA agent, where I can't trust anybody, where goons come over and threaten me, where another bunch of goons come over and threaten to cut me up. Why? Because I tell the truth. I say things that they don't want other people to know. They find it embarrassing. We are in a battle between the truth and lies, between the truth and what is inconvenient for other people, between the truth and other people's egos, between the truth and what embarrasses people, between the truth and other people who want to try and save face and cover things up. Why? Is it so difficult for other people to simply go, yep, that happened? Surely, in today's climate, virtue signaling, it would be smarter for those people to simply say, yep, that happened. I'm really sorry. If I apologize for this publicly, I'll get more points because I'll look like I've just reached the high moral ground as being man enough to apologize, man enough to make the public statement. I've even been accused of being a child molester. I mean, really. It's been endless just because I speak the truth. And where I'm treated badly, I fight back. So, by all means, you guys can listen to this podcast, try and fit it all together, but you will see that it all boils down to a simple connection that I made in the year 2000 by connecting to the goddamn internet. As soon as I connected to the internet, wow, that just made things a whole lot worse. Because had I never connected to the internet, there would be no problems with my ex. I would not still be getting stalked and hunted by his friends 22 years later. Members of my family would not be able to communicate with each other by text messages and talk about me all the time and send that data through the airwaves, completely violating my privacy, because of smartphones, because of social media, because of social media apps. People suffer. Julian Assange is locked up. Sadly, the only thing he ever needed to do to get accused of espionage was try and crack a password into the United States Department of Defense. I can't help him with that. I can't help him with that. It's not a method that I've ever used. I don't know if it's true. That's going to have to show itself in court whether that's what happened or not. But overall, the guy was trying to tell the truth. Wherever the truth rears its head, there will always be the most resistance. And sadly, we're in an era of dealing with a lot of people online who have become so brainwashed by politicians and the government in their use of social media, which they should not be on because it is civil space. They are not entitled to intrude on civil space. But these people have become so brainwashed by the politicians and the governments that these people now trust the governments. They trust what they see on television, and the rest of us truth tellers are out here having to constantly fight against ignorance to try and make sense even anymore. There is no common sense has gone out the window. Respect has gone out the window. People feel entitled to anything. There are people who are psychotic because of their phones. And the data keeps coming through exactly the same. The patterns line up exactly the same. The data mining keeps happening. The mass shootings keep happening. The terrorist attacks keep happening. And I've been here for 6 years putting my hand up saying, here's the problem, this is what's going wrong, that needs to stop, this needs to be turned off, NodeXLGraphGallery.org needs to be blacklisted, and they still haven't done it. And I'm still getting hunted and stalked. So there it is. Long podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'll be back again soon. And I hope that this has helped you put into perspective not just what you're looking at when you go on social media, but how everything that's happening at the same time is actually part of a data merger that's going through at a particular time and on the same days, the same dates, so that all that data lines up with the same date numbers and becomes entangled and manifests itself in our lives at a personal level. That's how it works. Take it easy, take care, and I'll catch you again soon.